Look, let's take a look. How far has he fallen?
At such an exciting time, everything is changing, and strange times create strange bedfellows. More and more, I find myself sitting down and having actual conversations with people who even just 5 years ago would have never thought to talk to me or me talk to them in a million years. But things have changed in a good way, and people on the right, people on the left, and the people somewhere in between or nowhere at all are starting to agree, hey, we have problems and we have to stop this political division before it destroys us completely. Christmas is coming up, and you'll probably be getting together here soon with a family member who voted differently than you. Can you bring that back together? That old friend that you had? Can they believe that you're not a fascist or a communist? How do we maintain the vision of e pluribus unum? How can we come back together? I think we can. To test my theory, I am joined today by a prominent political commentator from the left side of the aisle.
Oh my God, who could it be?
Welcome, host and producer of the globally popular online news show, The Young Turks, Anna Kasparian. I can't wait to talk to Anna, and I hope you listen to this entire conversation.
Not to rub it in here, but this is more embarrassing than when Samantha Bee teamed up with this guy in order to fight Trump. Do you guys remember that? Do you guys remember that in 2015, Samantha Bee and Glenn Beck got together and it was like a whole, Glenn Beck is moderating. He's becoming more liberal. See, we can work together with the Republicans. It's happening again. Time is a flat circle. It's all happening again. And you know how well that ended for Samantha Bee, right, guys? Oh, it didn't end well for her. Oh, it was a deeply embarrassing flub that Glenn Beck used to increase his prominence and normalize himself in the eyes of the public. That's crazy. Okay.
Conversation, because I think this is really important. And we're going to talk about abortion. At least I have it on my list. Let me talk to you about preborn. The left would like you to think that every woman who gets an abortion magically gets happier. And some people on the right want you to believe that they're magically evil.
Oh, my God.
I don't know the people who want to shout their abortion. That is evil. But the truth is, women are trapped and babies die. And the only way we're going to change this is by changing people's hearts and their minds. The Ministry of Preborn is fighting for moms who are deciding between the life and death of their unborn child. First thing they do is they introduce the mom to their child on a free ultrasound. That doubles the chances that mom will choose life. Then they show.
Oh my God. This is just an anti-abortion clinic. This is just an ad for clinics that masquerade as abortion clinics. I'm on their website right now. Yeah, they're pregnancy clinics. They're basically there to guilt trip you until you decide not to get an abortion. How fucking embarrassing for her to be on this show being introduced right before an anti-abortion ad read. My God.
Show those babies and mothers God's love by providing additional assistance for up to 2 years, because many times these moms feel trapped and alone. Right now, you can make a big difference. At the end of the year here, your tax-deductible donation can be the difference between life and death. $28 will buy an ultrasound. $15,000 will buy an ultrasound machine. $5,000 covers the entire thing for a day throughout the country. And through a generous match, your gift is going to be doubled. To donate, dial pound 250. Say the keyword baby. That's
I guess this is a healthcare setting that wouldn't call someone a birthing person. So, guess that's a win for her, huh?
pound 250 keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/Glenn. That's preborn.com/Glenn. Sponsored by Preborn.
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Very good.
Thank you.
So, for people who might not know
Thank you for the
who you
$2
are,
super
how
chat
would you
and for the first dono of stream? I'm just so angry.
describe who you were? Because you've had some transition on some things. Who you were, how you would.
Oh, by the way, sorry, I spent today doing a lot of editing, so I was going over old bits of streams today. And I went over one of the streams where we talked about TYT and Dave Rubin, reaching out to Anna Kasparian saying, "Hey, we should break the internet." And it made me remember that on stream like maybe 2 weeks ago, one of you, and I think it was Cream Bun Mommy, I think was the person who did this prediction, but literally called in 2 weeks, or 2 months, Anna Kasparian and Dave Rubin will be having their crossover. And I gotta be honest, it really seems like it's about to happen. Like, I thought it would take a couple more years for things to get this embarrassing, but here we are. So, my God, but props to whichever chatter predicted this coming so soon.
Self-identify yourself over the last 10 years?
Well, I would say that I was firmly identifying myself as a Democrat. I think that if you look at my policy prescriptions, for the most part, I'm still pretty much left-wing. There are some social issues
Hold on. Definition of left-wing.
That's such an interesting phrasing. For the most part, I'm still pretty much left-wing is very loosey-goosey.
There are some social issues
Hold on. Definition of left-wing to you. Is that Democrat or left-wing? What does that mean?
Well, left-wing in regard to, I would say like one of my grounding political values is that workers should have better pay, better working conditions, a seat at the table. Unionized labor, I think, is incredibly important, which, it's something that's been decimated in recent decades in this country.
Hey, Paladin.
But that's like my number one interest in politics. And that's not really something that has really been favored by the Republican Party, traditionally speaking. And historically, unionized labor was something that the Democratic Party looked out for. And I don't really see that as the case anymore when it comes to the mainstream Democrats. They're certainly more corporate now. They're certainly captured by their corporate donors. I think that the way that this last election went down really does show you the kind of political strategist rot that exists, the corruption that exists, and there's real tension now between the voters who want very specific policy prescriptions in order to deal with the rising inequalities that we have in this country when it comes to wealth and income.
Sure.
And then you have the Democratic Party, which is heavily funded by corporate interests and moneyed interests. And what those donors want severely conflicts with what the base of Democratic voters want.
True. So far, true.
And so this has been a growing issue with the Democratic Party. And what I see as, their campaign call is more and more culture war stuff. And it gets more and more extreme every election cycle. And I think that they're pushing more and more people away by sticking to the corporate politics while also getting more and more maximalist when it comes to some of the culture war type issues.
So
she thinks that working class voters are refusing to turn out because
fucking pronouns.
It really does boil down to that. Yeah, I mean, we've hit turf. We've hit full on turf territory. Like, give her like 2 more years, she'll be doing the Graham Linehan thing. It's embarrassing.
As I look, because it is so hard, what you do, what I do, there's so many words that come out of us every single day, and then out of context or not worded, exactly right. The way
Hey, Sake Tanuki.
You betrayed the left. I am the left. Judge Dredd vibes going on at TYT.
Oh yeah, no. So hard. Thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs.
I look at the Democratic
Hey,
Party
Story
or
the
the
Bard.
left
Thank you for
is
gifting
that
Little Morphine Annie a
there
sub.
is the machine that is in bed now with big business. And that's just the
Sorry, who
crony
backs Glenn Beck,
capitalism,
real
just
quick?
the vomitous kind of corruption that we all hate in either party, any party.
Right.
Then there's the average Democrat who
Right.
might disagree on taxes or whatever, but they believe
Okay. Yeah. Glenn Beck and Betsy DeVos. So he's backed by the DeVos family. That's cool. Literally starting last year. If you're wondering why he has the amount of money to put on a production on a gigantic production stage, it's because he's backed by a billionaire. Every single one of these propagandist individuals, former Fox News people, inevitably they have some kind of billionaire benefactor that will just support them to make whatever kind of slop they want.
in the Constitution and they believe in the Bill of Rights and everything else. And I think that has been that is the majority of people.
Is Glenn Beck a Mormon? Wait, I didn't know that if he is.
Absolutely.
And then there's this crazy left-wing Marxist, destroy it all kind of group. And that, I don't even know, maybe 8%, 10% is that. And it's the middle people who have been either lied to so effectively by so many people, mainly mainstream media.
Like, I'm sorry, how does one go on this show and not engage with the fact that he is a stooge of billionaires? You know?
But we're at the beginning in the Democratic Party, possibly, of those people waking up and going, I don't like either end
Right.
of the spectrum.
Yeah, I take a little bit of issue with the use of Marxist in this context because honestly, I think that there's maybe a total of like 5 actual Marxists in this country. In reality, we're talking about individuals whose politics is mostly based on, some fringe issue or some cultural issue that they have. It's not just that they care about that issue, it's that they've taken that issue and they've made it part of their identity, the core of who they are. And it's almost like...
Dude, she's just talking about trans people on Twitter again. She's just talking about trans people on Twitter again. The nebulousness of trans people on Twitter. Guys, you hear it, right? Like she's talking about, these are people who've made an issue core to their identity. And like, you're talking about just trans posters on Twitter who disagree with you. Like, best case scenario, she's talking about like the people who identify as Marxist-Leninists and are LARPing about like, oh yeah, with like 100 guys and pistols, we could march on Washington. Like, those people are not a significant number of people enough to even mention in a conversation like this. So like, I have to assume she's talking about trans people.
What you would expect from religious zealots. And so there's a fundamentalism involved in the way that they treat these issues, and there's no room to negotiate. There's no room to maybe consider the thoughts and concerns of other individuals. And so as they become more and more kind of like authoritarian in what they demand, they...
Oh my God. No, guys, this is the same kind of Silicon Valley like authoritarian or not authoritarian authoritarian definition that is being pushed by like that weirdly kind of like lefty fascist movement. It's not like lefty, but like corporatist fascist movement that we talked about not that long ago. Like the gray shirt movement in San Francisco. it's really the same. They talk about the real authoritarians not being, like the wealthy and the powerful, but they talk about the real authoritarians being like the academics and like the activists who are talking about who are being authoritarian over your language. She's parroting that idea. That actually kind of makes more sense to me that she'd been like sucked into that. I'm gonna find the guy's name who we talked about extensively on stream, and we'll talk about him in a little bit here.
They are pushing people away. And there are some issues in which the rights of one group might actually end up conflicting with the rights of another group, depending on what type of legislation you're pursuing. And so, of course, this has come up with the trans issue. And I've always been supportive of the transgender community, but when the rights of transgender people, particularly transgender women, start to cause some tension with the rights and freedoms of women or the perceived safety of women, well, let's have a conversation and avoid assuming the worst of the people who want to have that conversation, right? Because I think that in a country like America, where you have so many different people with so many different backgrounds, beliefs, people of faith,
Yeah, I found it. It's that Balaji Srinivasan. We talked about him at length. He goes on all kinds of podcasts. He's been on like the Lex Friedman podcast. And he talks about this kind of like kingdom of the cloud, where like it's essentially just like a little fascist fiefdom where you can maximize your corporate power. And it's the idea of that has taken pretty firm hold in like tech spaces. I feel like she is regurgitating some of what he's saying, and I'm wondering if he's an influence.
The only way this works is if we respect each
Sorry, I was looking for Balaji.
Assuming the worst of the people who want to have that conversation, right? Because I think that in a country like America, where you have so many different people with so many different backgrounds, beliefs, people of faith, the only way this works is if we respect each other and actually engage in these conversations in good faith. And I felt that the left was able to do that back in the day. And I don't know what happened, but we've moved further and further away from being able to have
farther back. Damn. Okay. Sorry.
kind of like authoritarian in what they demand.
This is what I was
They
talking
are
about.
pushing people away. And there are some issues in which the rights of one group might actually end up conflicting with the rights of another group, depending on what type of legislation you're.
Oh. That part. That part. She's talking about how the rights of like trans women are overlapping with the rights of cis women, and that's not acceptable. Yeah. Yeah, that's some transphobic bullshit. And unless she's talking about another group of people, but I genuinely have no idea what other group of people she'd be talking about here.
You're pursuing. And so, of course, this has come up with the trans issue. And I've always been supportive of the transgender community. But when
that's an interesting but right there.
The rights of transgender people, particularly transgender women, start to cause some tension with the rights and freedoms of women or the.
Oh, okay. All right. So I totally missed everything she said while I was looking up Balaji Srinivasan. She was just talking about trans women and cis women, but of course she just calls cis women women. Yeah, trans women are trans women, but cis women are just women. I see.
The perceived safety of women. Well, let's have a conversation and avoid assuming.
What conversation is there to have? Like, I'm sorry if some people are uncomfortable when I use the bathroom. I don't think you should cater to those people because all I'm doing in that bathroom is using the bathroom. It's all I've ever been using the bathroom for. And so she's out here talking about like the perceived safety issue because there's not a real safety issue. And on top of that, like, what is the productive conversation that you're reaching at the other end of that? You know, what are you getting here by catering to and coddling these fears? You know, like I don't know. I don't think we need to cater to the comfort of like a member of the KKK who's uncomfortable that a black woman uses the bathroom at the same time she does. You know, like I think that white supremacists should be uncomfortable. I think they should be uncomfortable wherever they are, not just the bathroom. I think bigots should be uncomfortable operating in a society where bigotry is unacceptable. Like, what conversation is there to have outside of like coddling bigotry?
The worst of the people who want to have that conversation, right? Because I think that in a country like America, where you have so many different people with so many different backgrounds, beliefs, people of faith, the only way this works is if we respect each other and actually engage in these conversations in good faith. And I felt that the left was able to do that back in the day. And I don't know what happened, but we've moved further and further away from being able to have those conversations in good faith without assuming malice toward individuals who have a slight difference of opinion.
So, I mean, well, let me just...
Oh, man, those of you saying she's really pulling a Dave Rubin, just... 1 second here. Let's see here. Oop. Where are you? Man, I'm really afraid. I'm not going to scroll on Twitter right here. Ah, here we go. Found it. Boop. Yeah. She's going so far, Dave Rubin, that Dave Rubin is actually reaching out to her. What an embarrassment.
Ask you first. Do you believe in the Bill of Rights?
Of course, yes.
All of them?
I love this country.
Yeah, I know.
I love this country. I love the idea of this country.
Right. I'm not questioning. I just want to know, do you believe in the Bill of Rights as written?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That used to be our unum. We could all come together and disagree and live different lifestyles as long as I'm not taking away your rights. You're not taking away my rights. I have a right to disagree with you. We can have conversations about anything and walk away and go, see you tomorrow, Bill. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's happened to us. There's been this erosion of education of how important the Bill of Rights is. We're looking now at a population, especially a younger population, that thinks that there's limits on speech.
Right.
There's not limit.
There are some limits, right?
What are they?
The typical example is you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater.
Not true. That was actually written by the Supreme Court to prove.
Come on. How is there not a moment here where she's like, what the fuck am I doing? Sitting across from Glenn Beck as he's like, actually, you can lie about there being a fire at a crowded theater leading to the trampling deaths of several people. You can do that. That's your God-given free speech right. Like, how does that not trigger like an instinctual, guttural response from you?
Against that.
Really?
Yeah, it was not.
But you can't incite violence.
Yes,
you
that's
can't
true.
engage in defamation.
You can't say things that directly incite.
What an evil motherfucker. Yes, you can't directly say things that incite violence, but you can indirectly incite violence. It is like a hell of an evil thing to say.
violence or panic.
Right.
And it's very clear when, we're going to go kill them and we're going to kill them now. That's the end of freedom of speech.
The only problem with this
But
is they are totally
without
taking away
freedom
our
of
rights.
speech,
Oh, yeah.
where we
Because they want rights for themselves and they want to take away your rights. Exactly.
can't say,
They want the right kind of people to have rights.
sorry, I respect this person, I love this person, they can live their life, but if I'm taking them to the hospital, I am telling the doctor that's a man, not a woman. Now, they can call them.
How I'm sorry. I'm sorry here. She's agreeing with him.
The doctor, that's a man, not a woman. Now, they can call themselves whatever. I could even be cool, totally cool with it, but we have to be able to have a civil, non-hateful conversation about truth.
I mean, I agree with you on that. And, the argument, and I think this is a decent argument.
I mean, guys,
That you'll hear from those who are more restrictive in
Hi,
or
Jack,
wanting.
can you tell me the brand of that thrift store dress you posted
yeah.
on B-Sky early yesterday morning,
can.
last Friday night? Thank you. Ooh.
what are you guys doing about in chat? It's from a brand called Bar 3. Bar and then 3 written as a Roman numeral, so with the lines and such. Why you oohing? Stop oohing at me, chat. You're welcome, Elena the Dragon Girl. Thank you for reminding me. And for the $5 dono. The dono did not dono ghost. He just said, ooh. Now, also, we've been going for about an hour. Top of the hour ad break. Hey, are you enjoying stream? Why don't you hit that follow button on Twitch or hit the subscribe button on YouTube and like the YouTube stream? Hell, if you're watching this as a segment, consider liking the segment. And hey, I don't make money off of the ad revenue on this channel, so please consider dropping those subs, those donos, those super chats, those memberships, etc., because that's what allows this channel to continue to exist. I literally couldn't make this stuff happen without the support from you guys, and I would love to become big enough to hire a full-time editor. The dream. The dream. So consider supporting Riverboat Jack, because we need to be bigger than Hassan, baby. Bigger than Hassan. Let's go. And with that, let's keep going.
More restrictions on speech is, well, we want better terms of service when it comes to, private companies, but free speech only has to do with the government. And if the government isn't violating your free speech, then why are we complaining about,
That's not a problem if the government's not in bed with all of the business. You know what I mean?
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
You are literally talking to someone who is backed by the billionaire Betsy DeVos family. Or DeVos family, sorry, because it's more than just Betsy. She also has a brother named Eric Prince, who's also a billionaire, and who has one of the largest mercenary companies on Earth. Cool.
Republicans used to be the big business people.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And
Can we have a size chart for channel goals? I'm not sure what that means, Thistles for Eyes, but if you elaborate, I'll be able to answer you.
I think they still are to a large extent.
Ah, yes, Eric Prince, the guy who owns Blackwater, the company that is rebranded like 10 times.
I think the Remember we talked about those, the three with Republicans? There's that machinery Republican. They're all in bed still. They're all in bed. That section, I hope, comes to an end. But there'll always be those people.
Any journalist worth their salt would know that Glenn Beck has been bought and paid for by billionaires and would use this opportunity to push back on the fact that he's talking about those people over there are corrupt, but we're the good ones.
So I agree with you on that. But it was when you're in bed, especially now, I don't know how you define fascism, but fascism, the technical definition of fascism, is a public-private partnership with the government and private industry. Communism doesn't let you have private ownership. Fascism says, no, you can have private industry, but you're going to do it our way, and we'll let you
That's not what fascism is.
have the company. And if you don't want to do it our way, we'll destroy you, take it away from you or whatever. We've been
Just nodding along with this nonsense. This is immediately discrediting.
headed that way.
Like there's a way you could do a sit down talk with Glenn Beck and not be embarrassing, but this is not that way.
For 100+ years, both sides have been doing it. Right now, the public-private partnership where the government says, we can't do this, but you can. That's fascism. That's wildly dangerous. And both...
I feel like I'm naive for thinking this, but I do think Anna knows enough to be able to push back on this point if she wanted to. So let's see if she does.
sides have a propensity to do that because they both like power and both like control and money. But because of social media and Google and everything else, we are in a situation to where who's controlling whom? Which one is more afraid of the other, the government or Google? Who's afraid of who? You know what I mean? Who has more power?
Well, I would say right now it feels as though the corporations have more power.
I agree with you.
Especially considering the fact that, corporate interests fund politicians on both sides of the political aisle.
Like no pushback whatsoever on his definition of fascism.
And so they're completely captured by corporate interests.
Correct.
And I think that has happened to the detriment of the American people, regardless of whether they vote Democrat or Republican. And so what I see as a bigger problem when it comes to this speech question and how it's impacting private companies is that private companies are increasingly catering to niche audiences or one side of the political spectrum over the other. And unfortunately, and I understand this because I think I was also
Private companies do that because it's easier to sell stuff to a niche demographic. What?
also kind of in that bubble of seeking content or information that only validated what I already believed because it's comfortable. And I totally understand why people...
Okay, so she's not going to push back at all. Thank you for that, Paladin Lost. I'll stop sitting in suspense now.
Will do that. I used to do that myself. I didn't do it consciously. It was like a thing that I think I was just doing because it's like, I trust this source because this source is reporting accurately. But it turns out, no, I actually trust that source because that source is telling me what I want to hear.
Correct.
And so this is a huge problem because the divisions in the country and the inability...
Excuse me.
Because the divisions in the country and the inability to have conversations with people you disagree with, I think is a product of the bubbles that we live in, right? The media bubbles we live in. And I don't know how to fix that. I mean, one way that I've tried is by providing counter narratives and a different point of view or playing devil's advocate on TYT.
Okay, if you're trying to fix it by playing devil's advocate, you're not playing devil's advocate. You're just supporting the position you actually believe while saying, haha, it's just jokes.
Or more importantly, if I've changed my mind, I want to be as honest with my audience as possible.
You have to.
And living in Los Angeles, living in California, which is completely controlled by the Democratic Party, it has allowed me to see some of the flaws in the policies that the Democratic Party is pushing for on a more national scale. And I don't want that to happen if I've experienced some of these policies and they have not worked out so well. But what's interesting is the resistance to any of that critique that you'll see from, not everyone in the audience, not even the majority of the audience, but there's always that.
This doesn't make sense to me, Jack. In what sense? I feel like I have a pretty good sense on what all is happening here, so feel free to ask.
Very loud minority of people who demand that you only tell them what they want to hear.
I know.
And validate what they already believe.
Or you're a traitor.
Or you're a traitor, exactly. Yeah. Or a grifter.
I think, one of the things, I love that one.
Yeah.
I was against Trump in
You literally take billionaire money, you hack.
2016, very vocal about it.
I remember.
And I was a traitor and a grifter. I was just trying to make money. And then he did some things that I said he'll never do. And I agreed with the policies. And I had said, if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. I did. And I was a grifter and a traitor again. I mean, it's just, there's no winning. There's no way to win.
Just as an FYI, in case any of you are remotely curious about who this Glenn Beck fellow is, he has an estimated net worth of between $150 and $250 million. So, yeah, I wonder. Oh man, how could anyone accuse him of being a grifter? Crazy.
More with Anna here in just a second. First, we're all getting older, and I don't know about you, but I have felt the aches and pains that come along with the kind of aging thing. I even used to suffer from horrible pain in my hands. I went to every expert possible, every expert. Nobody could make the pain go away. And, it was, well, I guess you just kind of have to live that way. And I didn't want to live that way. My wife told me, try Relief Factor. I honestly did not think it was going to work.
Okay, we can skip this. It's not interesting. Hey, sometimes you get one of those weird conservative ads where it's actually interesting. You're like, wait, what are they trying to sell me? That was not one of them.
Sea change. We're at the very beginning of it, but it's strange. I was just talking to Donald Trump. I was doing a fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago a couple of days ago, and I said, I think we're like the cool kids now. I've never been at the cool kids table.
This is wild. I look. I'm going to pause.
Gonna take a screenshot here, just for purposes. Just all right, saving now. Excellent.
On saying the cool kids.
No.
But I will
know.
say this.
But we've never been even near the cool kids. We're at we're in the hallway of the cool kids table.
Republicans still aren't cool. Being powerful doesn't mean you're cool.
You know what I mean? I know that, but we've never. And he said, YMCA. How is YMCA suddenly cool?
It's not just about.
Yeah, how is a song about gay hookups at the YMCA suddenly cool?
About that, Trump is, and the audience hates when I say this, but it's just demonstrably true. He's funny. He's an entertainer. I mean, he was an entertainer before, he was a politician. That's for sure.
That's what also causes trouble for him.
It does. It certainly does.
Yeah.
But, I think.
Hold me down, mommy. Make me regret forgetting the safe word.
Jesus.
Love ya.
Jupiter Quake, thank you for the $10 super chat. But yeah, I mean, like Amber Brains, I don't feel I totally understand how you feel. Like, this is a betrayal. We are watching one of the largest networks of people in our online media space that has been dedicated to pushing left-wing policy fall to fascism. You know, like it is infuriating and a betrayal. I mean, they could probably still correct course at this point, but I think the presence of so many conservatives in their comments really kind of solidifies where they're going with this.
The reason why you're feeling how you're feeling about the perception of the Republican Party now versus, in the Bush era.
Hang on just a second.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Republican Party because that's not cool. That'll never be cool. There's this new coalition of Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Elon Musk, people that are coming from all different points of view. It's the way America that I grew up in. It's the way America.
Oh yeah. By the way, I'm sorry. I saw this article. I know that I mentioned that the YMCA is a song about gay hookups, but let me put it this way. He can't sue me for my interpretation of his song. Sorry. That's not how lawsuits work, and that is not how my ability to say what I think about things works. Now, the one thing I will say is it's pretty rich to hear that claim from the band that dressed like this. Like, I'm sorry, you literally had a leather daddy in your band. You had a costume that probably wouldn't pass muster today, and then you had a goddamn leather daddy. You had a shirtless construction worker. You had a cowboy. And then you had a sparkly gold front man. And you're trying to tell me that your song wasn't gay? You really worked hard to make it gay, though.
We disagree on a lot, but we have one central vision, and that is, in this case, end this corruption, end this nonsense.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it. And, the CEO and my co-host, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, he is really trying to bring like a populist coalition of people together, and individuals, basically Americans who see the rot in our political system thanks to the corruption. And so it's been his top issue ever since I've met him. And so he's been trying to get money out of politics. So these politicians actually represent what the people want, as opposed to what a small group of corporate executives want. And I think that's really the key in fixing what's broken in our political system.
One thing I hate is that Anna came on your show and lied to your face.
I mean, I don't know that she lied to my face when she came on my show. I don't think that she's that person anymore.
The other thing is, look, members of Congress really should see themselves as public servants as opposed to individuals who are elected into office just to enrich themselves.
All of them should be.
So we have to ban their ability to trade individual stocks. This is madness that they're able to do this.
Ban the trading of stocks. Do not allow them to go into any business that they had any regulation or anything for at least 10 years.
I totally agree.
This revolving door is obscene, absolutely obscene. I say this kindly because I've been on the other side of the table. And
I do want to say that basically one of the things you're going to notice maybe going forward, probably in this interview too, is just that you can agree with conservatives on a problem. Like, one person can be like, the boat is leaking. And the other person's like, and the Republican's like, yeah, the boat's leaking. But your solution to that problem may be very, very different. Like, identifying a problem, like two people identifying a problem doesn't mean that they have the same solution. And often the solution provided by Republicans is one that empowers corporate interests and is not in the public's interest, right? That's one of the core problems here, where like I think you could probably find things to agree about with Glenn Beck, but he's going to have very different ways of going about achieving the thing, achieving that thing that is going to do a lot of bad things around that, Yeah, that's a good example, Mr. Malachite. One wants to fix the leak, the other wants to sell the remaining portions of the boat as oceanfront property. Yeah.
And I wish people had given me the benefit of the doubt of being a decent human being and actually...
Looks like you turned closed captioning off. Banana Brains, I don't turn off the closed captioning. It automatically turns off. I'm not fucking with the subtitles to spite anybody.
Meaning what I say. Because I do.
I said that more briskly than I intended. I'm sorry.
So I say this believing you're an actual decent human being, okay?
Okay.
The one thing that I look for in people who say, I've seen the light, is I know when I've changed, and I've changed many big points of view and many big things in my life, but I can tell you what color the carpet was when I had that epiphany. I can tell you the time of day. I can tell you everything about that moment because it was like, holy mother, I'm wrong. And time stopped and you remember it.
Right.
If you're sincere.
I don't think that's necessarily true.
He's like, if you're actually sincere in your change, and then she suddenly gets a little weird.
I think for some people, change comes slowly, and especially if your career and your life depends on a particular identity, a particular outward identity, you're going to resist internal change. And you're going to resist and resist and resist until you can't resist anymore. That's what I feel happened with me.
Okay, so wait. So then what was that? I think we might be saying similar things because it's not.
That actually has me wondering, Banana Brains, is there a way to default have subtitles on YouTube? If so, it would save me a lot of headache, because I usually if the subtitles aren't on, there either aren't subtitles or I just haven't thought of it. But it'd be nice to just have them on whenever they're available.
The heavens didn't open up.
Right.
Oh yeah, she had a story about a guy named Jeff who carried up a bike a couple of floors. That made her realize Republicans weren't all evil or something.
You all of a sudden go, I can't do this. I can't say this anymore. So was there a time, yes, it happened slowly, but was there a moment that changed you and said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore.
I mean, I would say the phrase I can't do it anymore, for me, applies to a handful of policy issues that the Democratic Party has been championing that I don't agree with.
So there's no personal, there was no personal event or anything that happened in your life to where you went.
I mean, I was sexually assaulted by a homeless guy. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, I was sexually assaulted by a homeless guy in Los Angeles in my neighborhood as I was walking my dog.
Oh my gosh.
And it was awful. I mean, I've talked about it multiple times. And look, I don't want to put myself in this position of being like this victim who's looking for empathy, but it is the moment where something very scary happened to me. And
why did that?
It wasn't just that had happened to me. It was the reaction I received from a faction of the left, okay? The social justice left, if you want to call it that, who think that, in some cases, the criminals are actually the victims and the victims are the criminals.
I mean, sometimes criminals are also victims. That's not a mutually exclusive distinction. But also, like, yeah, no one should be a dick to you after you've been sexually assaulted, point blank. You know, like, I I absolutely repudiate anyone who actually went after her for being upset after that, you know?
Insane. And I don't know how big this faction is, but they're loud enough to push me away completely. And so it wasn't that that had happened to me. It was the reaction of the left and how they were far more concerned with me talking about it because they felt that that was stigmatizing the homeless community. I have never gone out of my way to say negative things about homeless people. I mean, people who are living out on the streets are, in a lot of cases, victims who need help, right?
Yes.
But I was victimized by a guy that was strung out on something, could have been meth, you know, he was jerking around as he was walking toward me with his buddy. And
gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. But it took a while for me to get over that because I still have to walk my dog. And so multiple times a day, I literally have to think about that incident. And so I thought maybe it would help to talk about it. And then when I did talk about it, I totally regretted it because I was shocked at the way people reacted to me.
I do. Now, to be clear, I do empathize with this particular portion. Like, talking about ways you've been victimized online can be a double-edged sword. It can be helpful, but also the internet is full of terrible people. You know, like, the internet is full of people who will, like, attack you for being the victim of a sexual assault. And that can be a terrible feeling, right? Is that a basis for changing your entire, like, political ideology? In my mind, no. I don't think that's a good reason to change your entire political outlook. But I can understand how that would be traumatizing and difficult.
But what that moment taught me was some of the characteristics of the quote unquote left that I thought were good, right? Like the kindness, the open-mindedness, the, you know, willingness to go out of your way to look out for people who need help, like that kind of stuff. There's a portion of the left that has shed those characteristics. They've taken on a more nihilistic approach to things. And they don't even believe in reforms. They just believe that everything about every political system, every program we have, every institution we have is just worthless and we need to burn it all down. Okay. So that nihilistic nature, I think, leads to a lot of really bad ideas and terrible behavior online. And that's pushing people out, pushing people away. And like, I mean, you look at places like Los Angeles, for instance, right? Or Cook County, which is where Chicago is. I paid very close attention to Cook County and what the election results were going to be in Cook County because you have an influx of migrants going to.
Yeah, this is some fear-mongering bullshit right here. Like, I'm sorry, like, the solution to this is state intervention to give these people homes. Like, that's the solution to this problem. And like, I don't know, kind of feels like she's going out of her way here.
Chicago, right? You have a lot of anger among the Black community in Chicago because they've been nickel and dimed by their local government.
It's crazy.
And at the same time, their mayor, Brandon Johnson, is doling out the cash for migrants and justifying it. And so they're angry. And so I'm watching all of this happen, and I'm just like, Democrats need to wake up. Mm-hmm. Because more and more voters feel.
It is not an either-or situation between providing for migrants or immigrants and doing better by other marginalized communities in an area. Pitting these two issues against one another is one of the oldest conservative tricks in the book, and she's pulling it right now. It's not an either or. You can do both. You can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. And like it really is that simple. You can do both. It is a priority to integrate immigrants into your local community because they come in already with skills, meaning that they come in fully prepared and ready to help and give back to the community in a way that a newborn baby in your community it just isn't. They are an immediate addition to the workforce after you've onboarded them appropriately. Like it is a net benefit to that entire community, and that is going to reap dividends for decades to come. And on top of that, like, yeah, the community should also invest in Black and brown areas of the country or of the city, of, you know, whatever locality we're talking about, because it's the right thing to do. You should be doing that anyway. I don't know. Maybe we could take some of that police money that never got taken away.
Feel like they're being abandoned by the Democratic Party, economically speaking. And everyone got mad at me. Everyone's like, oh, you're anti-immigrant. I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm not anti-immigrant.
Immigrants built this country.
Yes, my parents are immigrants.
Yes.
Okay, I am not anti-immigrant. But I do have a problem with the Biden administration neglecting the border, pretending like there wasn't a migrant crisis at all, allowing these municipalities to be inundated with migrants without any federal resources to deal with the problem. And what? We're going to pretend like that's not going to cause electoral harm? Of course it is. So when you look at places like LA, there was an 11-point swing toward the Republican Party. Kamala Harris still won, you know, LA County, but 11% toward Republicans, that's crazy in Los Angeles.
You know,
can I just say real quick? The amount of money the United States spends on immigrants, on like the social services for immigrants, pales in comparison to the amount of money we spend trying to get rid of them, right? Trying to expel them from the country. Since 2003, we've spent $409 billion in order to constantly deport and hold people who could otherwise be working productively in our communities. Like, that's $409 billion compared to the $16 billion it costs in order to actually just provide them social services. And I feel like that's an important distinction, because often undocumented immigrants aren't even being paid those the money from the government in the form of like Medicaid or Medicare or whatever. You know, like, they are a net benefit to the economy, even by the most Republican like biased studies. And so it's really frustrating here to be like, oh, they're soaking up all of the money that could be used in other areas of the community, when they're actively generating money for the community that almost never gets cycled back into the immigrant community.
my problem with the policy there, again, look, I could be friends and debate and whatever with anyone, if it's honest. Thomas Jefferson said, "Question with boldness even the very existence of God, for if there be a God, he must surely rather honest questioning over blindfolded fear." Honest questioning means if I ask you a question and you present me with an answer and I'm like, I'm open to changing. You know what I mean? We don't have honest questioning. We now have got you questioning. We have cancel you questioning. And
yeah, no, Charles, exactly. We have an active labor shortage. We need immigration. We need those immigrants. That's why the money is money well spent, even if you are a stickler for nickels and dimes.
And beyond that, we have this system that props up lies and a government that is...
Keep in mind, his biggest backer is someone who wants to destroy the Department of Education.
...willing to engage in lies. If you wanted to bring people in and open the borders the way you did, and then move people with our tax dollars on airplanes to cities where you're changing everything in that city. Can we have that conversation first? And part of the problem was they were saying it's not happening. Well, yes, it is. And you're doing it behind our back in the middle of the night.
Well, it's interesting because, and look, I can definitely be honest about my own flaws and my own mistakes, because I bought the mainstream media narrative that there wasn't a migrant crisis.
Really?
And yeah, I did believe it. I believe because, look, I was an idiot because, I mean, who do you trust in today's media landscape?
I know.
Right? There's a lot of liars out there.
Yeah,
and when it comes to mainstream media, the fact of the matter is they do play.
The only immigrant crisis we have is that we chronically underfund the bureaucracy in order to admit more people into the country, and that we have a widespread privatized prison system that profits off of them being held in their facilities. That's it. That's like the big thing. Like, we could just invest in like pro-immigrant policies and infrastructure and we'd be totally fine. But Republicans want this to be the eternal issue so they don't actually have to deliver on the economy and can blame immigrants for any hiccups in the economy. That's it. That's the entire thing in a nutshell.
Defense more and more for the Democratic Party. And that's an issue because there was a time when that didn't happen. And so I still believed in their good faith reporting, even though it turns out, a lot of these reports would omit really important details about what's really going on. And so it wasn't until Texas Governor Greg Abbott started busing or sending migrants to blue cities where that woke me up. That woke a lot of people up. And suddenly America realizes, oh, there is a migrant crisis.
Why did that wake you up?
Well, because all of a sudden you're seeing migrants sleeping on the floor.
Yeah, because they didn't have any infrastructure built to accommodate them yet. If there had been a policy change where like Greg Abbott would start doing that in like 5 years, they would have had housing. They would have had services ready to receive them. When people just when several thousand people show up completely unexpectedly in a new city or town, like they need to find places to live. Them sleeping on the ground is literally part of the process if there are no facilities for them.
In the police department in Chicago, because they don't have shelter for these people, right? You're seeing, these. I love watching.
Yeah, Rainbow Krampus, exactly. My opinion of Anna used to be very high. Like I was like, oh, she teaches journalism classes. Obviously, she knows what the hell she's doing. And I gave her an undue amount of credit for knowing things. And frankly, this is deeply embarrassing, not just for her, but honestly, in a way for me too. And I'm pretty salty about it.
Watching streams of city council meetings, because that's how you understand what's really going on in these cities, right? These are real people who live there and they get their opportunity to speak.
Chicago's been enough.
My theory is that deportation, forced birth, and bringing back child labor are all parts of the same plan. Abolish school, send the kids to work. Well, yeah, I mean, basically, you like, no, they want to have like those school voucher programs so that some kids just don't go to school. Unironically, they think kids should just be incorporated into the labor force at all ages.
Amazing
Chicago's
thing
been
to watch.
Wild.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch every city council meeting from Chicago because it's
crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And for me, rather than relying on mainstream media reporting or anyone's reporting, to be quite honest with you, what I'll do is I'll go out of my way and I'll watch, the entirety of a government function, local government function. I talk to real people and I get a sense of where hearts and minds really are. And so on election night, I wasn't surprised at all. I knew what was coming. I totally knew what was coming. I knew that Cook County was going to swing, I think it's about 8 percentage points toward Republicans. I knew LA County, and this is what I was surprised about. I did not expect Donald Trump to flip 10 counties in California from blue to red. But I guess I shouldn't have been surprised about that either. Because when you look at the conditions that people are living in a Democrat-controlled state, Well, yeah, you can understand why people are turning their backs on the Democratic Party. You can understand why people are frustrated at the corruption, at the loss of $24 billion that was allocated to help the homeless, when homelessness only exploded during that time, and that money is now unaccounted for. It was funneled to nonprofits whose executives get paid.
Now, this is true, by the way. This part is true. Oftentimes, nonprofits that have cozied up to the government simply don't deliver and or lose whatever money is funneled to them, which is why we need actual government, like, branches and, like, parts of the government themselves that are accountable to do the work that these nonprofits are doing. The government should not be funneling money to nonprofits in order to do work that the government should be doing. Like that, the problem here is the chain of command to a nonprofit.
Minimum $250,000 a year. And they have multiple executives who are making at least that or more. And you just see the waste and you see the real grift. And so for people out there who are concerned about the grifters, take a good hard look at the systemic grifting that's happening right now. It's disgusting.
It is, again, I think, the problem with the public-private partnership.
100%, yes.
Stop it. These NGOs, let them raise their own money. Let them, if they're doing good, they will prosper. You know, people will find them. The government just funneling millions of dollars. It's a money laundering. Ukraine, I don't know where you stand in Ukraine, but good God, man, that is a money laundering system, and millions are being affected. And
I mean, the vast majority of what we send to Ukraine is not money. It's military gear that we long ago bought and manufactured.
Hundreds of thousands are in a meat grinder right now. For what?
I mean, look, I think...
What do you mean for what? For the sovereignty of their country, you ding-dong? So that they don't have to live as a Russian province. For what? They're stealing Ukrainian children, Glenn. For what?
I think that the UK and the US made a big mistake in discouraging Volodymyr Zelensky from continuing or engaging in peace negotiations early on in that war.
Yeah.
So that's the strongest opinion I have about what has transpired in Ukraine. You know, my heart goes out to the Ukrainians. They're trying to defend themselves. You know, they were invaded wrongfully, obviously. But I feel that the way the United States has carried out its foreign policy, certainly, you know, starting in the Bush years, and it's only gotten worse from that, it's not really benefiting anybody. And it's certainly not benefiting the American people, which is another reason why I think you're noticing a bit of a shift or a realignment when it comes to our political parties. And look,
it's bizarre.
Trump came in and he just kind of like messed everything up in the Republican Party. And it's really weird to find myself in this place where you hear Republican voters take on this anti-war, you know, identity.
Republican voters aren't anti-war. They voted for a guy who's been openly talking about wanting to invade and bomb Mexico. He's not anti-war. He wanted to bomb North Korea with a nuke. He's not anti-war. And you might be like, well, the Republican voters are taking on this anti-war identity, but like, they're not. But they're not, though. Like, if Donald Trump declared war day one he was in office, they would cheer and happily go along with it. They're not anti-war.
See, I think
Democratic voters take on a more pro-war, like neoconservative type flavor.
Kamala speech at the convention it was like
he wants to do a war that will prop up a fascist or an authoritarian that he can be buddies with. That's the kind of war he wants to fight.
What?
One that he can profit off of in some way.
Yeah.
Are you Dick Cheney? What is that? It
Not
was
Dick
bizarre.
Cheney, but she was honored by his endorsement.
I know.
Which disgusted me.
So, but I think there's something to be said that I think with conservatives, the definition of conservative, what I believe is the right definition, is we look at things that are happening. What's working? Save that. Get that part out of here because it's corrupt, it's garbage, it's old think, whatever. And progressive should be, we're more anxious to move forward. Let's go. The two of those things together is what provides the balance, you know?
Totally. You need that tension.
You need that.
Yeah.
It's important. It's an eagle. Can't fly with just one wing. But when you look at what has happened to the conservatives, I started changing 2006. I mean, I was all for the war. I was all for
remember
Iraq.
that, yeah.
I was all for it because I believed that we could change things. I was dumb enough to believe that you can hand people freedom and they want it, or it will just work.
Oh yeah. People in those countries definitely don't want freedom. Like I'm sorry. They do. They just want their freedom. They, you know, like they don't want to trade one master for another. They want their own freedom. And the United States was in the Middle East for 20 years, and we didn't get rid of the people who wanted to rule over them. And we lost. Like I'm sorry. You can only prop up a papier-mâché government so much.
It barely works here. You know what I mean? You have to earn it. You have to want it. And I was also naive enough to think that we were the good guys.
That's a great point. I mean, look at Iran. I mean, we orchestrated a coup in Iran, which is part of the reason why, you know, you have this theocratic, you know, situation that we're now fighting against.
Right.
Doing regime change is not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
The U.S. should not be in the business of engaging in regime change wars, period.
George, I don't know if you've read his farewell address. Okay. If we would just do that, we would have been fine. But the State Department for decades has been on this path of we're going to control everything. If you're a country that says...
You know, Donald Trump controlled the State Department, right? For 4 years? Yeah? Okay, just checking.
We don't torture, but we'll ghost plane you to some place that will torture. You're a monster.
100%.
You're a monster.
100%. I can't believe I'm hearing you say this stuff. It's
I've said
crazy.
this for years. I've said
insane.
it for years. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
But
I don't know. I feel like it's the lowest possible bar a human being could have.
You have to be consistent with your principles. And I think there's a lot of conservatives, and I'm so happy to see that now there are some Democrats that are doing the same thing. Like, I was for big food. I was for big pharma. And then I saw it. And I feel like saying to Democrats, guys, you were right. Now, why have you abandoned that position? Because we would agree. We could get so much done.
Can I ask you something? I'm genuinely curious what you think about this because...
Oh, my God.
You
guys know that, like, Glenn Beck, if he were put into a position to raise people's wages, wouldn't, right? You guys know that if Glenn Beck was put into a position to up regulations on dangerous chemicals, he wouldn't, right? Like, the entire premise of everything he has ever worked for is to deregulate industry on behalf of his billionaire benefactors. That's his entire purpose for existing. It's why he's a millionaire. You know, almost a quarter of a billionaire.
Started to really sour on Biden when, in my opinion, he was pretending to fight for his agenda. And part of his agenda was to
Raising
allow
minimum
for
wage?
our Medicare system to just simply negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. Believe it or not, and this is the most anti-capitalist thing imaginable, right? Because capitalism, you're supposed to have competition, you're supposed to welcome negotiation.
Yes.
Our Medicare system, not allowed to negotiate drug prices. So he was pursuing a provision in his Build Back Better plan that would allow for the negotiations to happen. Well, then they whittled it down to 10 pharmaceutical drugs. Oh, what can we do? You know, this is the thing. The Democrats like to play good cop, bad cop. So you'll have the majority of the Democratic Party, in the Senate in particular, pretend like they're all on board with Biden's agenda and the idea of having Medicare negotiate drug prices.
We have the same problem in the Republican Party, by the way.
And then you'll always have the bad cops who are willing to raise their hand.
Wait, no, you don't have the same problem in the Republican Party is why we don't have a Medicare for All system, you ding dong.
And basically torpedo that provision. And that's essentially what happened with Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. But don't make the mistake of thinking they were the only ones, because sitting on the bleachers waiting were other corporate Democrats who would step in if they needed to prevent the passage of that provision.
Citation needed.
And so
I know that there are corporate Dems, but the overwhelming majority of the corporate Dems were going to go along with it. Like they had been whipped into order to go along with it. You can't say, oh, well, you know, they would have voted against it. You don't know that.
Love watching Democrats celebrate themselves because now Medicare can negotiate the drug prices of 10 drugs. And sure, that's better than nothing. But I mean, I'm not going to give you a reward.
So
for
I'm sorry. Yes, 2 Democrats torpedoed this, but so did the Republicans. One of which you are talking to right now. I mean, Glenn Beck didn't personally torpedo it, but he is a Republican. He supported their inaction on that. You know, like I'm sorry, like this conversation is making it seem like Glenn Beck is like, oh yeah, Republicans really wanted to get this too. You know, we can work together on so many things like big food and big pharma. And it's like, no, you can't. Because if you could, Republicans would have voted to allow for that wide scale negotiation. They didn't. And if the question here is like, oh, well, you know, both sides are getting paid off by their corporate donors. And like, yes, both sides are getting paid off by corporate donors, but it's not in equivalent amounts. Because if you're saying, well, the reason the Republicans are voting no on this is because of their corporate donors, then it's every Republican versus like 5 Democrats. Like the argument you're making here isn't making the point you think it is, Anna.
Whittling down a policy that made sense. That would have saved taxpayers in this country a lot of money.
I think we could come to agreement on this easily. That's why I'm so excited about RFK. Get them out of government.
RFK murdered like 50 children. I'm sorry, but like, how do you look at a guy who is directly responsible for the deaths of like anywhere from 50 to like 70 children and go, yeah, this guy's the one we want to have in charge of all of our healthcare stuff? Are you kidding me? Oh God, sorry about that. Didn't mean to bounce it, but are you kidding me?
Get them out. I don't want them anywhere around. I want our government to have that limited work of just who do you run to if the police are in part of it? You can't run to the press and say, hey, look, because the press no longer is protecting the little guy. They're protecting the pharmaceutical company or the government, which is the same.
The press was doing positive PR for the Democrats on this issue. As the Democrats essentially destroyed their own agenda. Okay, like it was ridiculous. So I just, If you're going to run to the press to get accurate information about what's going on, I mean,
but what I'm saying, though, on that is there is no good cop. We are a system of checks and balances. Congress and the Senate, they're all backroom deals. I talk to congressmen and senators who say, what the hell am I even doing here? We don't debate anything. We don't talk about anything.
What is
they
it
come
going
out
to
and say,
take for the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future to visit Anna?
Oh God, who knows? Maybe December 24th. Who knows? Thank you for the $5 dono, Catalina Gearbox. Rainbow Krampus, thank you for the $5 super
Anna,
chat.
we shouldn't be doing regime changes. Glenn, agreed. Trump, 2018, backs a coup to overthrow Maduro in Venezuela.
Right? Drastically expands the drone war. Gosh.
hey, here it is. You have 10 minutes to read it and vote, and you're voting this way. That's there's no checks and balance. The administration, does the president work for all of these administrators, or do the administrators work for the elected guy? You know, it's all out of control. And the one that was supposed to watch is the media. And the media, and now with big tech, they're all part of that system. We have to find a way to go back to I really feel like if we could, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again and reset it to its factory settings? You know what I mean? There are things that...
Why are you nodding along with that? Do you not remember what the factory settings of the United States are? They were bad. Black people couldn't vote. You could only vote if you had land and were a white man. Those are bad factory settings.
that we need, that we can't cut. There are things that we've got. But we have got to, it's rotted from the inside on both sides. We have to, I don't want to, the American idea is right. It's great. It's to create a more perfect nation, meaning we're never going to be perfect. And the mission statement in the Declaration of Independence, there's nothing more inspiring from any country in the history of the world than that.
I don't know. I feel like some countries might have things that are equally inspiring, if not more so. I don't know enough about the foundational documents of any other countries, though, because I only learned about this one, which makes it a lot easier to make those American exceptionalism arguments, I suppose.
I want to try to create that, knowing we'll never get there, but we can make progress towards it. So we can't jettison everything, but we have got to go in with, I don't even know if you can do it with surgical knives anymore because it's so big and out of control. Just start chopping down some of reshaping the tree.
Yeah.
You know, you have to understand when he's talking about that, what he means is cutting Medicare. What he means is cutting Medicaid. What he means is getting rid of, like, the Americans with Disabilities Act. What he means is, like, every social service that you have ever enjoyed. You know, he means reinstating the ability to discriminate against people for pre-existing conditions in healthcare. What he means is effectively destroying your ability to live a relatively comfortable and secure life. That's what he's talking about. You know, just start chopping. Well, you know what? He's not going to just start chopping at the police budget. He's not just going to start chopping at the military budget. He's going to start chopping at the other ones, the social services ones.
There's been a lot of attention focused on, you know, DOGE, right? The Department of
Social Security is another one of the big ones.
Government efficiency and what they're going to focus their energies on. You know, I'm cautiously optimistic, mostly because of the fact that a lot of the conversation is focused on the Pentagon, and there's agreement.
You've been duped by a man-child. You've been duped by a man-child who's only failed upward his entire life. I can't believe it.
on both sides of the political aisle that there needs to be a serious accounting for all of the resources that are being squandered on.
Oh, no, Jack Harper, he's talking about whenever Republicans talk about
I'm
cutting
no
the
oiler,
government.
nor a ghost. But I've been looking out for when I could sub again to give you a mere fraction of what you need. You deserve so much more.
Well, Crystal Hazer, thank you for subscribing with Prime and for supporting me for the last 9 months. I really, really appreciate it. This show wouldn't be possible without people like you, so thank you so much. But no, he's talking about cutting, like, the VA. He's talking about cutting the services that the government provides. And, of course, he's also talking about gutting, like, the administrative state. But the far bigger costs to the government are things like the VA or Medicare. Those are far bigger drains on the budget. And whenever any Republican is talking about cutting, they're talking about cutting those things.
On the Pentagon,
but
right.
that also has to happen in things that you're going to like. I mean, I believe the Pentagon is completely out of control.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry. I think it's a bad idea to cut people who like want to work from home. They're doing their jobs. They're getting all the things they need to get done. I think that's fine. I think if you're firing them just not because they're not doing their jobs, but because they are doing their jobs in a different place, I think that's a silly reason to fire someone. But more than that, you have to understand when they're talking about cutting the government, they're talking about cutting your Social Security. They're talking about cutting your health care benefits. They're talking about cutting any kind of program that keeps people off the streets and in their homes. They're talking about cutting or increasing the amount you pay for insurance, for drugs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're talking about enabling the mass fuckery that beset people in like the 1920s and 30s. They just want to do it again. The same policies that led us into the Great Depression, they want to embrace those and have another little Gilded Age before it all comes crashing down again. And when it does come crashing down, they'll just buy it all up for a song, because that's how disaster capitalists make their money. They make money off of our suffering.
They haven't been able to pass a single audit.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with that, but I believe defense is very important. We could go back and forth. But there's also stuff on the other side. We have squandered trillions of dollars. We don't even. How do we have a government that says, geez, where did we put that $2 trillion? How does that happen?
Yeah, it's crazy. It is. I mean, I agree with you. I think that even when it comes to, look, I agree with programs that are meant to help the homeless. Mm-hmm. I totally am. So that's okay. The type of
that's cool.
Those are the types of policies.
If
they're effective, but there's a lot of waste, because the way that those policies are being implemented in places like California isn't really meant to help the homeless. Mm-hmm. It's about funneling taxpayer money to nonprofits.
Yes.
That's what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about waste, yeah, I'm open-minded about taking a look at these government agencies and really questioning whether these massive bureaucracies make sense, right? Whether the money is well spent on various programs. Let's do a little bit of testing to see if these policies or these programs are even effective in carrying out what their objective is.
See this?
Yeah, if only there were people out there whose job it was to assess social economic policy, and if only there were other places around the world who had tried different kinds of economic policy and then written up in-depth research about the results of those policies. If only that existed. Oh, what? That does exist for anti-homeless programs that help put homeless people in homes? Oh, it's called decommodified housing, and it works really, really well, huh? Oh, man, also, it works really well with like some kind of like UBI program that gives them money with which they can have housing. Okay. So we actually do have tons of data and tons of programs that actually work and can be facilitated by the government rather than nonprofits. Huh. If only we could advocate for specific policies like those.
This is why I think the 10th Amendment
Mm-hmm.
is so important. It creates 50 laboratories.
Mm-hmm.
You want universal health care in Massachusetts? Have it. Do it. Vote for it. You want it in California? Have it. Do it. If it works, we'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't work, you can't just say,
Except you don't want other states to do it in the first place. You oppose them in those states too.
oh, we need bailout from the federal government. Why should I pay for something that doesn't work?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And if there's 50 laboratories, somebody's going to come up with something better. You know what I mean? But we have all of this federal regulation to stop people from trying things that might work. You know?
What you know, one of my pet peeves on podcasts like this, right, is that they never say specifics. It's so rare for one of these Republican types to actually say a specific. All of the federal regulation is just stifling innovation. All these innovative policies are dying on the vine. Oh, really? Which ones? Name a couple. Which policies have all these federal regulations killed? And how? Tell me more. Because my impression is that one of the ways you think that they're being stifled is by like having to, I don't know, provide services to both black and white people. You know, like or you know, these organizations can't be white supremacists, so it's, you know, costing them more money, or it's not something like that. Like, name what policies are being stifled by federal regulation. Please name a few. No, you don't get to get away from this. Name them. No, we're not changing the topic. I said name them. Yeah, like anyone worth their salt sitting across from Glenn Beck here should ask him that question. Like, which policies? That's not even like a big ask. That's just a very simple way you can have a much more targeted conversation. And if he has an answer, that's great. You can go down into more specific places and have an in-depth conversation on those things. But like, have any kind of intellectual curiosity here. Even if you're not like, even if you're politically allying him with him in this conversation, right? Have curiosity.
Yeah. So are you consistent on that issue, though, on the idea of states' rights and allowing for the federal government to just kind of take a step back?
Good night, Vice
It
Sophia.
seems like a setup question.
No,
but
I'm
yes.
not. It's not a gotcha
Okay.
or anything, but mostly because in conversations with Republicans or with conservatives or anyone on the right,
Yeah.
they tend to have this idea of states' rights when it comes to economic policies or things like healthcare, as you mentioned. But then it comes to some of the more conservative social issues where they do want the federal government to be involved and have a standard. Like, for instance, you know, there's a small but loud group of people who are on, you know, Trump's case about not wanting to pursue a federal ban on abortion.
Right.
I'm curious what your thoughts are
Federal
on that.
government has nothing to do with it. The Supreme Court has ruled with it. I don't think you can legislate morality. I think the problem with
I do not trust Glenn Beck at all. He opened up this episode with an ad for those fake abortion clinics that trick women into having children. Like, this man is just a liar.
As Noam Chomsky said, the country was founded on the principle that the primary role of government is to protect the majority from shimp.
It's true. It's true. We do need to protect the majority from shimp. They're too powerful. Thank you for the $5 dono, trains and bullshit. But no, like, I think the second Republicans are able to get a national abortion through, they're gonna do it. Like a national abortion ban. The second that becomes an option, they're gonna do it.
the abortion case is on the right side. Forget about the baby for a second. Mom. Why is she in that? She is most likely not in it in this situation because she's like, I want to shout my abortion.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
They're in trouble.
Yep.
Something has happened. Something has failed. They have no framework around them to help them. We cannot just say to that person, no, because they'll go someplace else.
True.
We have to care about the baby and the mother.
He opened this up by calling for people to give $5,000 to a private pro-life clinic. I mean, like, I'm sorry, just real quick. I'm going to pull it up here because this is literally the website. Empowering clinics to save more lives and souls. Life-affirming clinics. These are clinics that masquerade as abortion clinics and then don't actually provide abortion care. Their main service is to provide you with images of the inside of your uterus. Their job is to basically convince you to have the baby. Yeah, the ultrasound machine grant. We want to help you make the biggest impact possible. The ultrasound machine grant provides a new machine or cash grants up to $15,000 for the purchase of an existing machine training included, so that they can guilt people into having babies they don't want. I don't think you get to make this argument, Glenn Beck. I don't think you get to make this argument.
And help fix what's broken. When somebody is using abortion for birth control, I don't even understand your moral sense. But I understand 80%, I bet, of people who are having an abortion. There's no law that will fix that. None. We have to find the way by working reasonably with each other. You know, I went to GLAAD.
I'm sorry, what's the reasonable middle ground here, Glenn? You can have half an abortion? What is it?
And met with GLAAD this years ago when Iran was throwing gays off of the rooftop. I've always been for gay marriage. I'm more libertarian.
When Iran was throwing gays off of rooftops, and GLAAD is an organization in the United States. They're not representing Iran.
I don't care. Marry who you want. Don't tell me and my church what I have to do, and I'm not going to tell you what you have to do. And I went to GLAAD and I said, look, we could argue all day long about wedding cakes. They're throwing people off the roofs because they're gay.
In another country, GLAAD is dedicated to domestic policy.
This will be wildly unpopular with my audience, and it will be wildly unpopular with your audience.
Your audience was against gay marriage, Glenn.
But why don't we come together and say, we disagree on a whole bunch of stuff, but this we agree on. Life has meaning. Okay? They wouldn't do it.
Interesting. Okay.
They wouldn't do it because they were in the middle of a lawsuit about not allowing businesses to discriminate against people who are gay. The entire premise of like the gay cake Supreme Court case was whether or not businesses have an obligation to serve you and whether or not they can deny you service on the basis of your sexuality. That was the entire premise. Because then you get into circumstances like, well, if you can deny a cake to a gay couple, can you deny ambulance care? Can you deny medical care? Can you deny bureaucratic services if you're a government official? Can you do, so many other things? The reason that case was important was because it allowed gay people to exist openly in society without being discriminated against. And Glenn Beck is like, well, why can't we all just value life or something? Because coming out with a statement that says you value life doesn't accomplish anything tangible in the political sphere, which is what you're supposed to be doing if you're an advocacy organization. If you're just putting out meaningless non-statements, it doesn't mean anything.
And until we have the guts,
Yeah, it was about the civil rights. It wasn't about the goddamn cake.
to stand up and say, look, this is going to be unpopular on my side. It's going to be unpopular on your side. But we're both reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
Laws, when it's oppressive, when they're just forced on you, it feels oppressive. We have to change the hearts and minds. And the only way we're going to do that is by talking to each other
100%,
and actually looking at the problem, not just saying, oh, it's the homeless. That means, my father used to say, I'd say, Dad, I want to talk to you about God. Okay, we cannot talk about God.
I like kind of to get back to what I was talking about at the very beginning of this. Remember how we talked about how agreeing with Republicans can often be like, you can both identify that there's an issue, but then there are vastly different solutions to that issue, right? That a Republican and a Democrat will come up with. This is like one of those circumstances, right? Because, a leftist will look at homelessness and be like, a systemic issue that we could solve by, providing decommodified housing or like certain kinds of initiatives on the local and city level that would allow for people who are homeless to find homes and find housing, Whereas Republicans will just be like, yes, there is a big homeless problem, but that's because Black people are lazy. It's because of their and not because of like their biology. They're lazy because of their culture.
Okay, we need to start Operation Get Jack on the Glenn Beck Show.
Oh God, please don't. I don't want to be on the Glenn Beck Show. But you see what I mean? Like you can, like the left and Republicans can agree that something is an issue and a problem, but come to wildly different reasons for why that is, which then lead to very different types of solutions, right? So it winds up being that, like, Ben Shapiro actually makes the argument that like Black people tend to be disproportionately poor because of their culture. And like the reality is they're disproportionately poor because of the history of slavery, redlining, Jim Crow, etc. And like the issue here is that they cannot identify the underlying reasons why the problem exists and are instead content to just paint people as being inherently problematic. And I mean, frankly, I think Glenn and Anna fall into that quite neatly.
What do you
also,
mean?
welcome, Raiders.
Let's call him first cause, because God means something different to you than it does me. First cause, we don't have any images in our head. So we start from there. When we say, we want to talk about abortion, it means something to you, means something to me that's deeply seated in us.
True.
We have to find our way to the compassionate core of the human experience.
How do we get there? Like, what is your suggestion? Mm-hmm.
I have for so long waited for a fair interview on my side.
Right to refuse service to anyone for any reason is still something I believe in as a former business owner. Well, I think that's a pretty shitty stance to have. I for one, don't support any business that, for example, wants to uphold their right to deny Black people a spot at the bar. I think that's pretty shitty. And I think that's a lawsuit waiting to happen, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Should probably remember that if you become a present business owner.
Somebody who doesn't agree with me. I can get fair interviews. I can get bad interviews from people who agree with me. And I don't mind somebody reporting something and me going, well, I don't think that's exactly true, but I can see how you got there. There's no such thing as it's all a setup. all of it is a setup.
Yep.
And you know it because you're on the other side. And I'm sure people on both sides right now with you. That's why before we started, the only thing I said to you was, you're in a safe zone. I'm not trying to get you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, it's nice of Glenn Beck to create a safe space for Anna.
That has to happen. And the only way that happens is back to Jefferson. Honest questioning. I really want to know how you got there. Mm-hmm. When we talk to each other, and I've got an agenda. Oh, you know what? I've got some people coming over for Christmas. I know exactly. I'm going to say this, and they're going to say that, and then I can get them to that. That's not honest. Mm-hmm. When you say, I'm not going to talk to you because I disagree, what I'm actually saying is, I'm smarter than you, and you have nothing to teach me.
Yeah, and ironically, that's actually the dumbest way to proceed, because one thing that I have noticed is as the left kind of avoids any debate or conversation with individuals they disagree with, well, their ideas don't really get challenged, right?
Right. But I think ideas should be challenged by like valid questions and not valid questions that are coming from like a sincere place of misunderstanding or, ignorance. Whereas, and I'm always open to answer said questions, like I do this show, right? Like I'm a trans woman. I know some people are going to come in not knowing a lot about trans stuff. So I'm always open to engaging with people who just don't know and who are seeking to learn more, right? But there's a big difference between engaging in a conversation like that and engaging with somebody who just wants to call me a faggot. Like that's not helpful to me, and it doesn't move the conversation forward. And in a similar vein, it doesn't help me to engage with people who want to call me a slur, but are, they've learned to be more polite about it, I guess. Your Jesse Singals of the world, the kinds of people who, essentially are cry bullies for the liberal establishment, who come through, write discourse pieces about how, like, oh man, trans kids, they're getting medical care and that's bad for some reason. And then you look into it and it's actually like, well, yep, they got the gender affirming care that they needed, and 99.9% of them really liked it and are living happy and fulfilling lives, and the other 0.1% detransitioned and they're doing better as a result. And also, like 0.1% is a very minuscule rate of failure for any kind of medical intervention. So actually, those are pretty good statistical numbers. This is such a frustrating conversation to go over, frankly.
Your ideas get challenged in a debate, in a good faith debate. I'm not talking about,
Right.
Like I can't deal with disingenuous people who hide their actual intentions, which is the category that I put people like Jesse Signal in. And frankly, now I kind of put Anna Kasparian in that category too. Like, I don't believe her when she says that she is for transgender people, because frankly, I don't see it. I don't see it. Like, I when you come onto this show and you're talking about how, like, the rights of trans people are actually trampling on the rights of cisgender women, or sorry, women, as she says, well, you're creating that dichotomy. You're creating that animosity when none exists. We do not need to cater to the most bigoted members of society in order to be palatable. And I object to that notion whole cloth. There's no such thing as a good faith debate with a right winger. No, there is. There is such good thing as good faith debate with a right winger. But generally speaking, that right winger is going to be someone who is, someone that you have a personal tie to. not a rando on the internet and not like a podcast host, you know?
Right.
Gross, rolling around in the mud type stuff. But, I like when my ideas are challenged because it forces me to consider the flaws or a blind spot that I might have.
Yes.
And so I want to make good arguments.
I think the left is so weak right now, so easy to take apart.
Yes,
because
you're right about that.
I hate that he brings up that the left doesn't debate the right cease when we try they impose unreasonable terms, demands and act like they are right when they make it impossible to debate them.
I mean, honestly, I do think that kind of comes down to a skill issue sometimes. Like, I think you need to have better, we need to have better debate skills, frankly. The left in general needs better rhetorical skills. It's something they used to teach in school, and then they moved away from it. But I think we need to bring it back. Rhetoric is really important for convincing people that you are right.
Been thrown up against the wall for the last 20 years.
And it fosters critical thinking skills. I think it's generally a good thing for people to learn.
Years saying, you're a racist, you're a bigot. You can only have that said to you if you're a good, decent person so
Right.
long before you go, what am I doing that makes me appear that way? What is it? And you self-examine and you either fix or you become stronger.
Mm-hmm.
No one's thrown the left up against the wall. I don't think people have any idea how to defend what they think they're for.
I mean,
That is true for a lot of people, by the way. A lot of people do not question their fundamental premises, and I think more people should do that.
it's interesting because I've been forced to realize this when I've been making arguments to my audience, to the left, in regard to, hey, you know what? We've implemented this criminal justice reform policy.
My issue with this is that those have been bad arguments.
And it's actually not working out the way we expected. We need to tweak.
They're bad arguments that often demonstrate a lack of knowledge on a subject, like cash bail. Cash bail is something she talks about all the time, and she seems to think that moving to a cashless bail system means that people just do a crime and then like walk scot-free, and there's no kind of enforcement, and then they just do more and more crimes, which isn't how cashless bail works.
Tweak it here, recalibrate it there, and maybe, this policy could actually work out really well. Let's fix these little gaps that we see. And rather than consider that I'm coming at them in good faith because I want these policies to work, all they do is just call you a grifter. Okay,
So-
that's it.
so
And
let me-
that's the thing. You can call me whatever you want. Call me a grifter.
I have no idea if she's grifting or not. She's just wrong. My issue is that her arguments are wrong and bad. And we've gone over multiple times why that is.
if you
don't
want.
care, yeah.
But please try to contend with what I'm saying. Like, debate me on this. I want to have an actual exchange.
How does cashless bail work? Well, essentially, it puts the onus on the state to show that someone who is accused of a crime is a threat to, like, the surrounding community. And if they're not a threat to the surrounding community, if they're not going to imminently commit another crime or go do some violence or, are deadly and dangerous, then they are allowed to go until their court date. It basically makes it so that you aren't able to just leave jail because you're wealthy. And frankly, I agree with the notion that no one should be in jail just because they're poor. Which is what effectively cash bail is. It just imprisons poor people.
If you just think that you're going to call me a grifter and move along and that's good enough, that's not good enough. Okay, that makes you look weak.
There are so many times, I've said this for years. Please tell me, not that I'm wrong, tell me how I'm wrong.
Wait, lightening the load on bail is soft on crime? You have to they haven't been proven guilty of the crime yet. You have to prove that in a court of law. Sorry, we have a system premised on innocent until proven guilty. There should be no penalty on you unless you are demonstrably an imminent threat to the community.
Want to be wrong.
Exactly.
I
Yes.
want to be wrong on some of these things. But we don't do that. So let me turn that question back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody trusts anything.
Right.
I mean, I'm a conservative. The FBI is a danger to our society.
Mm-hmm.
The Department of
Has been.
Justice, yes,
Yeah.
it is. And I used to be, I trust those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't trust any of it anymore.
Yeah, because he wants all of it slashed to meaninglessness.
And it's American and responsible to not trust blindly.
Right.
You know what I mean? But when you don't have anything and you're not,
It's why crime is up, because crime isn't up, crime is down. Every major crime is down in almost every single major city in the United States. On top of that, criminals should be in jail, not people who are just suspected of crimes. Anyone can be suspected of a crime. What matters is if you're convicted of the crime. So I don't think just because police think, or let me put it this way, I don't think because agents of the state think you might be guilty of a crime but can't prove it, I don't think you should be in jail. But that's exactly the system you are supporting in this circumstance. That seems pretty fucked. Now, also, it is shown that things like the death penalty or life in prison or any of these other things do not reduce crime. The threat of being in jail, the threat of torture, the threat of like execution does not reduce crime. It just doesn't. There's no evidence that it does. All it does is make people in the public feel some kind of catharsis. And I don't think just because it might make us feel a little better that we are entitled to take other people's lives. That's a very low bar for enforcing a government policy. I believe in reals over feels. Let me put it that way.
not even sure the people you're talking about are grounded in the Constitution, actually do not want a theocracy, do not want a fascist state, do not want a communist state. They do care and are willing to say, man, this kills me to say it, but you have the right to believe that.
No one is arguing that conservatives don't have the right to believe conservative things. They're arguing that the things conservatives believe are bad and harmful.
If you don't have that trust, how do we gain that trust back?
Honestly, we can talk about things like transparency, more accountability in the media, stuff like that. But I think a lot of what we're seeing in the country right now stems from economic frustration. And you have to think about it this way. When Americans feel like they have no stake in the game, that's where the nihilism comes from. When you feel like you have nothing to lose, that's what's going to give you the type of mentality that's going to allow you to literally shoot and kill a United Healthcare CEO in cold blood, in broad daylight, okay? We have some real problems in this country right now.
Right, but that's...
And I'm not justifying that that happened at all.
Yeah.
But you have to think about what led someone like that guy to think it was okay to carry
It doesn't happen in a vacuum.
that out in the morning. Okay, like
right, but it doesn't
in New York City.
I just want to be really, really careful because I know what you're saying, and I agree with you. But I want to be very clear on what you're saying. Nothing justifies.
No,
Nothing
I am not
justifies.
justifying it at all. That was murder.
But it is explicable.
Right.
And even if I have deep criticism,
Something being explicable and justified, those are two different things that conservatives love to confuse.
of our healthcare system.
Me too.
Okay, deep criticisms.
Me too.
However, The idea that carrying out vigilante justice is the solution is laughable to me. What happened yesterday did nothing to reform our healthcare system, didn't even...
Let's just take a look here. Da-da-da. Oh, I mean, I guess it accomplished one thing. Unless this was just a coincidence, just a coincidental reversal of course. Anyway.
Inch us closer to it. And at the end of the day, it just led to the murder of one individual who happened to be the CEO of one of the healthcare companies. That's not going to fix or solve anything at all. So, but what I'm trying to get at is there's a reason why there has been this increase in political violence in the country, which I'm also not justifying. But I'm also not surprised by it because people feel like they have nothing to lose, or more importantly, nothing to look forward to, nothing to build upon.
So can I ask you a difficult question?
Yeah, of course.
I believe in the American way, not the system we have.
Right.
I believe in the founding ideas. And I believe we can be that. And I believe tomorrow can be brighter. And I believe my children can surpass me. It's going to be hard.
Very hard.
And in this, if we keep going this way, no. But I do have optimism. And I do believe the individual chooses to chart their course. Some people need help, assistance, whatever. We're not born on a level playing field. We're all born equal. We all have the equal chance, but some of us need some help, and et cetera, et cetera. What I hear, from the left is you can't do it because that group of people are in your way. You are black, whatever color, you're a woman, you're gay, they hate you, they'll stop you. That leads you to a place of hopelessness.
I agree that there's a certain level of defeatist mentality on the left that I don't think is necessarily helpful, right? We have to think a little more strategically about what type of, systemic obstacles are standing in our way of helping people become what they want to become in life, right? Get to where they want to get to in life. Look, the Federal Reserve put out data in 2021, fourth quarter of 2021, showing that the top 1% of this country owned almost 31% of the wealth.
I know.
Whereas the bottom 50% owned like 2.3% of the wealth. Like, it was insane, right? Just insane. So I give you those stats because there has been a growing problem in the country of more and more of the wealth floating to the top. And, when we talk about waste at the Pentagon, understand that one of the biggest redistributive policies that we have in this country that takes money from the bottom to the top is the money that goes to the defense contractors.
Yes.
Tiny, tiny group of people who have a lot of sway over our political system because of money in politics.
Yep.
And so our money gets redistributed from the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder, the tax-paying, hardworking Americans, to this tiny group of executives.
But I would say also, I'm not on the low end of the scale.
Yeah.
Also for me.
Yeah, exactly. Middle class. It's getting harder and harder.
Exactly. Middle class people just like you, Glenn Beck. Glenn, net worth of $250 million, Beck.
For people to hold on to middle class status.
Yeah.
And I understand the frustration and anger in the country. I feel it time to time when you see what's going on. And so you think about the federal minimum wage, it's $7.25. I did the calculation earlier today because I was curious, what's the exact amount of money I mean, you're barely making like $13,000 a year with that, right? So
I hate to say this, but I'm such a states' rights guy.
Yeah.
Why should it be $7 in New York City? That's like a dime.
Well, this is the thing. I actually think the model that you see in Scandinavian countries makes a lot more sense. They don't have federal minimum wages. You know what they have? They have unionized workers who get to negotiate working conditions and their pay.
I mean, just as an FYI, New York State's minimum wage is $16 per hour. But the issue is that there are states that have lower or no minimum wage on the books, which is why the federal minimum wage hike is necessary to help out people who are making money in those states at the minimum end of the spectrum.
With
yeah, $16 an hour is still not enough to live in New York.
Collective bargaining, which makes way more sense. So for me, Donald Trump choosing, a pro-labor secretary was a big deal, because voting in favor of the PRO Act, which does away with the intentional obstacles that prevent unionized labor from even forming, is important to me. And so I would rather have the workers have a say over what they're getting paid and what their working conditions are.
So let me push back on it, because I know history. I actually think unions are important.
Yes.
I think business is important. When one side gets the thumb on the scale, it's bad.
It is.
Okay?
Yep.
And, FDR was very dead set against unionized federal workers. You cannot negotiate against yourself, okay? And knew that would cause all kinds of problems. He was a big labor guy.
He was, yep.
Not in the federal government.
FDR was not a big labor guy. FDR capitulated to the labor rights movement of his time because the labor rights movement was so powerful. He did not do it by choice.
Okay.
He had to be brought the heel.
I am all for, and especially now, I mean, I'm not a universal basic income guy, but I have been saying for 10 years, we have to talk about this because
like this is my problem, right? Like, Glenn Beck is trying to portray himself as maybe slightly more progressive than he would on a solo show, right? But at the same time, all he's really bringing to the table when he's discussing this, he's like, well, I'm not a huge universal basic income guy, but we gotta talk about it. And it's like, well, you don't support universal basic income. So really what you're bringing to the table here in order to make yourself look like kind of this enlightened centrist is essentially just saying, we should have that conversation, and then never actually having that conversation or coming to support that policy, in which case the value is just in wasting the time and energy of your ideological opponents. Really, that's all this is. That's all this is. This is just treading water, making Glenn Beck look more reasonable, and then ultimately diverting attention and energy into inaction and apathy. It's all performative bullshit.
Because there's about 10 people that all of the money is going to flow to, and you're going to be a serf and a slave for the rest of your life.
Definitely, yeah.
Because it's all going to change. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do want a gig economy. I want an economy that
I do want a gig economy. You understand that is the gig economy is that's the scenario where everyone's a serf. Everyone's a peon, and the money just flows to the top. What are you talking about, man? You want the gig economy so that workers can't unionize.
I'm a mom, and I only want to work these hours. I can check in when I want,
I can check in when I want. I don't get health care. I don't get benefits, and my company can fire me at any time.
Limiting people's options.
The dream
is not good. Balancing and making sure you're not getting ripped off on either side is better.
Absolutely.
So how do you achieve that when labor unions...
Let's not do a company town, let's do a company country.
No, unironically so, Ren. That's exactly what he's proposing. Jazz Dog, one of the best examples of the gig economy is just Uber. Uber workers do not work like set hours. They do not work set days.
My psychic advisor told me you need $100 and extra for Starbucks and the tube you hit.
Yo, Michael Reich, thank you very much for the $154.87. That is an oddly specific dono, but thank you so goddamn much for that incredibly generous support. Folks like you make this show possible. Thank you so much. Your psychic advisor was correct and should also watch Riverboat Check. Super chill of you. Thank you so much. Is this worth a trombone? Maybe, but we're almost done with this segment. We'll get there when we get there, okay? Paid on work done, not time spent. Kind of. It's basically just, you work when you can, but it's in practice a way for people to have multiple jobs so that, you work your set hours at like the convenience store, but then you work, 8 additional hours because you're only part-time at the convenience store. And so then you work like 8 additional hours driving people for Uber or Lyft or something, There are also other ones that are more versatile, like TaskRabbit is like a service where you can just like do, you can like go chop somebody's wood for a set amount. You can do just like odds and ends jobs, basically. So the gig economy is basically just taking jobs that previously existed and destroying their ability to unionize or have like social interaction with other workers. In general, that's kind of what it means. It is the fully atomized experience of the individual under capitalism. Yeah, Fiverr is another example. Yeah.
Can give so much money to politicians.
We got to get money out of politics. And I mean that. I'm not just talking about corporate interests. I'm also talking about the power that unions have, both on a local level and on a federal level with the campaign donations that they engage in, right? Like,
but how do you do that? You have the teachers union.
Yeah, I'm in favor of getting big money donations out of politics. Like, if we get rid of corporate money, I'm going to have a lot less of a problem getting rid of like union money in politics. But like, we got to get that corporate money out first. Like the getting the union money out is like a much farther down the pipeline idea. Ideally, let's just make all lobbyists illegal. I would love that.
Right.
Teachers union keeping kids out of school.
Right.
Because it was a union. There was no science. We now know this. How do you do that?
What are you talking about? Wait, what?
Campaign donations that they engage in, right? Like,
but how do you do that? You have the teachers union.
Right.
Teachers union keeping kids out of school.
Right.
Because it was a union. There was no science. We now
keeping students out of school because there was a union? What is he talking about? Wait, does anyone know what he means? Sorry, I haven't read any news stories about teachers unions keeping kids out of school because the union exists. Is he talking about teacher strikes? Okay, so he is referring to okay, it's either COVID restrictions or it is teacher strikes. Either way, he's full of shit.
Now know this. How do you do that?
You have to pass.
There was no science. She nods along with that bullshit.
Look, Cenk Uygur, through an organization that he founded called Wolfpack, has been fighting for a constitutional amendment to get money out of politics. And it wouldn't just impact corporations. It would impact any entity that engages in these current legalized bribes. And I think that's the right course of action. Now, It's difficult because you need.
I will say Wolfpack does good work. I will say that like Wolfpack I think is a noble endeavor, and I do hope that keeps chugging along while they do this rightward pivot.
Lawmakers on a local level, like states, to agree to a constitutional convention, and that's been an incredibly difficult thing to accomplish.
Or amendment.
I wonder was worth the fart.
One-eyed heathen, thank you for the $5 super chat.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and there are a ton of Democrats who don't like the idea because they're worried that it's going to be
Okay, he was talking about COVID. That's silly. We have plenty of science that shows that like COVID was dangerous and deadly. Over 1 million Americans died. He's just being full of nonsense.
hijacked by, Republicans, and they're going to get their way. But I think that really this is the only way that we're going to fix our broken system, because otherwise all of these politicians,
sick of it. I would agree with you, but the problem is their platform is really too large to be ignored, in the sense that I feel like almost like a professional obligation to cover them in order to debunk their bullshit as they travel along this conservative arc. Like if part of my job is debunking conservative propaganda, then I owe it to like the progressive space to apply that skill to and profession to this,
they're not working on behalf of the American people. They're working on behalf of the individuals who have bribed them. It's that simple. And we've seen how it's been playing out. If we do away with money in politics and we pass laws banning members of Congress from trading individual stocks, which in some cases, it's obvious they're doing it with insider information they're getting from their closed-door briefings.
No. Nancy Pelosi is just a genius.
Genius. Yeah, she just outperforms the S&P 500 consistently.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, I am thrilled that you are here.
Thank you.
And I know there's probably a zillion things we disagree on, but you are a gracious and very smart woman. And
Thank you.
I'm proud to have you on the show. Thank you.
The love bombing is so effective. It's so effective.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You bet.
It's like all she wants out of this, honestly. Yeah, that was deeply disappointing, but I continue to do this stuff because I feel a professional obligation. Yeah, that was a lot of two people nodding at each other, saying that they agree that discussion is good, but then no policies really agreed upon. Yeah, they didn't push back on each other at all. They simply used each other in different ways. And then ended with like just some sucking up. That was sad. That was pathetic. One of the original reasons I liked TYT was because they had fight in them. They had a fight in them for Republicans that I hadn't seen before. And this is just utter and complete capitulation. It is an abdication of the struggle. And I think that we need to call it out for the absolute failure that it is, So, with that being said, we got to make sure people in the progressive space, in the liberal space, understand what's happening here and can adjust accordingly. Because I imagine that there are going to be, in the coming months and years ahead under a Trump administration, where TYT is going to be shifting quite a bit. And we need to give the people who are, becoming disgruntled and leaving that community a place to come. And I just want you all to know, if you are a TYT refugee, I'm here, and I hope we can all learn and grow together while we build some solidarity for the dark times ahead. Segment button press.